Hi, Kerem.
Hi.
Thanks for joining Data Shark blog. I'm very excited.
Me too.
Awesome. Maybe you can start by introducing yourself.
Sure. So first of all, thank you for having me.
Oh, my pleasure.
So my name is Kerem Nevo. I'm VP Growth or VP Growth Division, as I was told, because it doesn't sound that impressive when it's only VP Growth. So I had the growth division at the Israel Innovation Authority. I'm 39. I live in Tel Aviv, married to Igal. I have 3 kids, Michael, Uri, and Hagar, which is a small, cute baby.
Amazing.
So maybe a little bit about my background. I joined the Israeli Innovation Authority on the magnificent date of October 8th this year. So I'm pretty much new. Before that, I was Chief of Staff of Wix COO. And I was also the founder and CEO of the Israeli Growth Forum, which now you are a member of.
I am. Yeah, that's how we met.
So maybe a few words about the Israeli Growth Forum. The forum was founded at 2015. So let's imagine 2015 in the Israeli tech ecosystem. No growth companies. We had around 6 companies, very young, you can say, around 100 employees, who had a vision of not selling your company, not doing exits, but growing here in Israel and maintaining most of its activities in Israel. That was the concept. No much of a legacy around that area, but it was a vision that was compelling to decision makers. And basically, you could see that the Israeli government didn't expect this phenomenon to happen. They didn't expect to have companies who want to become big companies in Israel. So there was no infrastructure for those kind of companies. This is why we founded the forum. I think the forum will celebrate its 9th birthday, I think around now. And today you have a lot of those kind of companies, you guys included, who are big companies who operate here from Israel and from the growth forum activities, but not just that, you have good infrastructure to do so.
Amazing. So I want to take this opportunity to maybe talk a little bit about the relationship between private companies or public companies, the tech sector, and government, and how to maybe make sense of all of that. In a way, when you look globally, I'm not so sure that every government actually appreciate and consider the relationship with various sectors, not to say about the tech sector. In Israel, it's kind of the big story. Everybody talks about the tech industry. And I think maybe starting from the very basic, we in business companies, business-driven companies, we always say, if this government, if this prime minister, if this minister would have been judged as a CEO, they've been immediately fired. And, it's kind of an interesting dialogue about the relationship between, or the way to think about managing a country and its divisions, or managing a company. So maybe we can start there.
Okay. So I think you're absolutely right. If a company...
They all should be fired. That's basically the story.
This is not what I'm saying. So if this was a company, a business-oriented company, and it was managed the way it is, the CEO would have been fired. I would argue that it works the other way around. If you or any other CEO would wake up as the prime minister of Israel or any other country, for that matter, and try to manage it as a firm, he would not be re-elected and would have been kicked out pretty soon.
Interesting.
Basically, these two entities are not so much alike as you can imagine. It's very easy to sit at home, and we discussed this earlier, to sit at home, watch TV, get annoyed, throw pillows at the screen and say, oh my God, I could have done this so much better. But getting to know the public sector, which I grew in, I was just, it was a specific period in time when I was loaned to the private sector. So getting to know the public sector better, it doesn't work like a private company at all. And I want to start with a story. After the war broke, I had a conversation with one of the CFOs in the Growth Forum. And he told me, listen, I have a great idea. Maybe I can do reserve service in the Ministry of Finance. I can come to the budget department in the Ministry of Finance. These are the guys who manage the Israeli budget, and do reserve service. And I told him, I have a question for you. Let's say your company is in trouble. Would you take someone as a reserve service from the budget department to work with you? And he said, never. Why? I said, this is a profession. I told him, great, this is also a profession. And I'm using this example to explain how these two worlds, we feel like we understand the public world really, really well, but it's so much more complicated. First of all, you as a CEO, you can hire whoever you want, right? You can fire whoever you want. You can pay how much you want to anyone you choose. You can make up new divisions and shut them down if they don't operate well. You can close operations and build them in a different country. You have the freedom to do whatever you want with your headcount. This is for a start. Second, your funnel is very clear. At the end of the day, you have shareholders which you need to make profit for. This is your goal in life. And then you have a funnel where you have to convert users to do something that you want them to do in order to generate revenues. The public sector making decisions around policy is a chaotic world where it's not about generating revenues for us, for the citizens of Israel. It's around balancing between interests where everyone are right, and they are right all the time. So if you, let's say, have a funnel that will ultimately get you to a specific conclusion around the right path to take, government affairs will have 10 different ways to go about this decision. All of them will be right, accurate, depends where your upside is. And the way to balance between interests, understanding the people, understanding the interests, understanding the battle around resource, and making a decision that fits the most is out. And even when you think you have the right policy in a certain matter, you still have to persuade all of those people with all of those interests in order to get something done.
So first of all, it's very interesting that the way you describe it. It's almost diametrical opposite to the way businesses will operate, right? We primarily need to take care of the bottom line. Governments need to take care of basically the policy and where they feel that they should incentivize their potential voters. So it's a very different approach. However, eventually we're all being measured by results. And I think I want to connect it in a way to our tech industry. At least that's where I can maybe appreciate and understand the story. The tech industry, in a way, could operate regardless of government, right? We can build technology, we can build companies, we can have a global approach, but still, I think that the support and the driven of a vision by the government and amplifying the value of the tech sector will be critical for this industry, specifically in today's time. But war aside and geopolitical problems aside, I'm still curious why would the government even care about a specific sector?
So I think when the Israeli government is looking at the tech sector for many years, and I think this was the case in the point in time when we founded the forum. I think around that area, you're right, they didn't. I mean, they had this line they used to say, and the industry used to say the same. Please don't interrupt the high-tech sector from flourishing, and don't intervene, don't do anything. However, there is another sentence that is, I think, has a lot of value in it, that if you're not around the table, you're on the table. If you don't take your place as a stakeholder around the decision-making game, which we talked about earlier, right? It's a matter of interest, and you have an interest around the game. You have an interest around how the tech structure is supposed to be built, right? Because you are making decisions every single day that have to take in account the tax, the corporate governance, the availability of great talent that you need in order to operate. Regulation, right? You are working around AI. It's an area where we're going to see a lot of regulation in the next decade that will change the industry to the deep. If you're not involved, let's take that as an example, okay? Let's say the government wants to put regulation around ethics in AI. They don't know what ethics in AI is. They're not professionals in that area. However, they have a lot to say about ethics. And as we said, everyone are right all the time. So everyone will push to many kinds of directions. If you're not there as a professional, as someone who understands the technology, understands where the world is going to, understands where the potential and the interest of the Israeli industry is, you will get bad regulation. So if you don't want to be on the table, you need to be around the table. And this is why this meeting, this joint thinking has to take part. And this is exactly where the Israel Innovation Authority comes into play, because our role is to be kind of the mediator or the translator between the two parties. We have to understand the industry. We have to understand the technology. We have to understand how you guys think, where the world is going, and to be the pros of the government around this issue. But also we have to understand where the governmental interest lies, and to balance between the two and make an offer for both sides and help mediate and translate, because this is not an easy conversation to have.
So it gets a little bit complicated, the relationship between public sector and private sector. And I'm curious, how much should we as a sector push our agenda to eventually a government organization that has a very, very different set of motivations?
This is up to you. I think there are points in time where everything is doing fine. I mean, everything is going smoothly, and then you don't want the government to be part of each and every crossroad you stand upon, right? On the other hand, sometimes, let's say you are just around an M&A deal, okay? And the structure that you want to use is something that is very common in the US, but in Israel haven't been tested yet. And you have no clarity around how this is going to work. You gotta have the government with you on this journey, so you will get the best outcome possible, which also balances the interest of the people and our, joint pocket here. So sometimes when you come across a challenge, there is no other way. You got to do it, right? Sometimes the way you want to take will be relevant for tens and tens of other companies. And then we got to make this into a rule and make this like something very clear for all companies to use. Sometimes the role of the government is to say, no, there are things that are more important than what you're suggesting here. This is why this has to be a conversation and not something. There are other countries, and here is why I think Israel is really, really special. In other countries, many times, there is no real conversation. There is no connection. If a tax lawyer from the US will come to Israel and start practicing law here, they will be amazed by the number of times they have to go and talk from someone from the Israeli tax authority. They will be amazed. They will say, I'm 30 years, I'm a tax lawyer. You know this sentence, right? 10 years, I'm a tax lawyer. I have never entered the office of the IRS, right? So this is something he would be frowned upon, right? They will say, why does this work like this? But there are advantages to this situation because at the end of the way, you have someone to talk to. You can change the reality, not only try and walk around it. And I think that's a very big advantage that the industry needs to know how to use.
Awesome. So I want to change tracks and talk a little bit about decision making. We're in the decision intelligence business, data and data-driven culture. And, we had kind of a side conversations around the importance of data in decision making. And do we all make data-driven decisions? And you have a very interesting perspective around that. So do governments make data-driven decisions?
No, they do not. I would argue that, first of all, let's look at the first step. Governments don't use data enough. They need to use data more. They need to become more of a data-driven organizations in order to make better decisions. But I would argue that only takes you 70% of the way. And this 70% is super important, okay? Because I don't want any decision maker to make a decision around what he heard yesterday in the grocery shop from his neighbor. I want them to understand big numbers, statistics, trends, you name it. But it cannot take you all the way, because if you need to balance between interests, I don't think that the interests lie in the numbers, and values don't lie necessarily in the numbers. And I want to give you an example. At the beginning of the war, it's also the beginning of my new job. We understood very quickly that there is a problem in the tech sector of companies who need to raise money now. They have a runway of under 6 months. They have really great assets, great teams, great technology. They have partners. They sometimes have investors, which are great investors, but they are now stuck. Their investors are on the fence. They don't want to invest now when everything is so shaky. And those companies that are around sales, starting to sell their product, are stuck under 6 months runway. They can shut down if no one does anything. So we decided to initiate a fund of 400 million shekels. Exactly for those companies. The idea of the fund is to take those companies and tell them, listen, we can give you $1 million if you bring a private investor who matches our fund. The idea was to take them to the point where they have at least 9 months of runway. So they have the time to really raise money, we hoped, outside of this situation.
And that's specifically for the tech industry, tech companies?
Specifically, they had to be tech companies. It was around technological assets. Exactly. We expected to receive around 300 requests, so we can spread the money around for good companies. We ended up with 800 requests, which can tell us something about the way the industry is holding up at the moment. And now there is a question, and now it's the Hunger Games, okay? And there is a question, who do you give money to? And who will not be eligible for this money? Now, I think the Innovation Authority is really interesting. Why? Because it's a very professional governmental entity. It's not, a governmental ministry. We are independent. We don't have a minister who is a politician. We are able to make decisions alone. But still, how do you allocate those? It's not a lot of money, okay? This can be this can be a nice C round for 2 companies, right?
Right.
So how do you allocate these funds? Now let's give it to the AI. What will the AI do?
It's a good question. It would start looking for data. It will start analyzing who's in maybe the deepest distress with the highest chances of survival.
What will they use? Let's say, okay, I will share with you the data that I have. Okay, what is me as a committee member? Okay, the data that I have, I know the cap table, I know the investors. I have a deep review of the technology. I have a market benchmark and a competitor landscape. I have information about the founders and the team. I have it all, right? I have the financials. Okay, so now what?
It's a good question. It's almost a question that I asked in one of the blogs, one of our investors, will AI replace investors eventually, right? It's almost like, would you give AI the privilege to decide who's going to live or who's going to die?
So I agree that the AI would eventually act like an investor. They will say, this company, I see the competitor landscape, I see the investors, I see what they've done, and they will give the money to the companies who will generate the most value to the investor, who is the government, okay? But this is not how we look at things. Because sometimes these companies who will generate the most revenues and are the most at risk, whatever the AI will conclude, and a private investor will conclude the same, it will give them money because that's a great opportunity, right? So these companies who used to get the highest scoring on our boards, we didn't give them money at all because they will be fine. This is not our job. But a company that struggles and has this line of products who are physical in Kiryat Shmona in the north and cannot get to their factory. And 2 of their founders are in reserve service for the past 2 months. These guys, the chances of survival are slim. But still, I need to give them the money. Because this is where the government needs to take action, exactly there. Even though they will most likely not generate revenues for me. I'm not looking for revenues. Having said that, I don't want to give money to the mediocres. I don't want to give money to companies that whatever happened to them is not October 7th. It has happened a long time ago. So this is a matter where you have to put your humanity, your values, and also your professionalism, and to find some kind of combination to help you make decisions.
So it's a science and an art story between what you call 70% where the data is going to take you there, and add a set of policies or decision-making process that has nothing to do with what data presents you, which I would argue AI is kind of picking up on that. Generative AI is definitely doing it. And I think one of the interesting things that we talked about in one of our conversations was storytelling. And are we all about storytelling? And so I'm kind of curious, where does that take you?
So I think, as I said earlier, I think that sometimes when you work around data, okay, and you have now the 70%, you
nailed it.
You are 100% sure of your 70%, okay, and you know where you want to go. You know the right policy that you want to implement. It's not just up to me. I'm not a sole decision making in this process. Now there is the Ministry of Finance I have to take with me, and the politicians, and the Knesset, and other stakeholders. You cannot imagine the number of those stakeholders who hold different views, different knowledge, different professions, and also sometimes different values and different interests. And so my 30% is around finding the place where all of those interests meet and finding the right story to tell. Now, let me tell you something about my experience with the private sector. I think you guys are the same. Maybe my 70% is your 80%, but you're still telling a story around your data. How does the saying goes? The Excel can suffer everything. I'm trying to translate from Hebrew, right?
It translates well.
Okay, so you can take the data and tell whatever story you want to your shareholders, to your board, to your employees, to your users. You can tell whatever story you want. But use a graph and not a Word document. Okay, I think we are practicing the same practice, only I am aware of that, and you're not. I am admitting the
I'm not
fact.
so sure awareness is so great.
Sometimes,
sometimes ignorance is a bliss.
But I think we use the same methodology because I live in a much more complex world with so much chaos and complex interest. I have to be aware of it, and I have to work a lot harder around my story and around the interest I'm trying to balance. But if you look at what the industry does, it does the same with a lot of its stakeholders, but doesn't admit it. They take, I think, and I think that this is a place, and if I have a kind of a criticism around the industry, I think that they tend to take people who believe that data is king and not appreciate enough the knowledge around storytelling, around understanding human beings and human beings' interactions, and its importance, and intuitions, and shared values and interest, and use that kind of intelligence alongside the data. It doesn't replace the data, but it contributes to having a very diverse set of voices around the table, and it makes the decision-making a lot smarter.
It makes, first of all, I totally agree. And I think that storytelling, specifically, thinking about the tech industry, we're all storytellers. Eventually, we're trying to sell a product, sometimes a product that never existed before. So you kind of need to find...
Sometimes it doesn't exist at the moment and when you're trying to sell it. Yeah.
Most of the time, it doesn't even exist. And when it does, it doesn't necessarily work. But, fake it till you make it aside, I still think that storytelling is a massive part of the qualities of tech talent in order to actually deliver. So I'm 100% relay to everything you're saying. I still feel that at least in the private sector, data is critical. And when you look at companies that make data-driven decisions versus companies that make just logical, kind of gut feel, intuitive decisions, you would see eventually long-term, you will see the difference. And I think the data is definitely a big part of potential success for companies. But I totally get it. Maybe now better than when we started this conversation. Why in the public sector, in the public sector, in the government sector, you don't necessarily care about data because you're appealing to various values, policies, sectors that maybe are underserved, and you specifically serve them more than what data tells you is double down on those places because you're going to yield better success. So yeah, it's super interesting.
But I want to tell you something about that. In the balance between data-driven decision-making and other kind of metrics that I want to make decisions around, I still think the 70% should be around data. Because if you make decisions only around hunches and serving your interest or your sectors, you necessarily are not a good decision maker. So the 70% still lies in the data area. I'm just saying you have to balance between the two. And I want to maybe come back to your initial question. I think that in the past, it was more a diffuse kind of relationship between the public sector and the private sector. People used to do some time in the private market, get acquainted with data and with KPIs and with data-driven decision-making, and go to the public sector, go back again. And both worlds really enjoyed this kind of diffusion because the public sector got so much more excellent talent working for the common good and doing great impact. The salary sucks, but the impact is on all fields of life, education, health, transportation, you name it. You can impact the way we live in this country. And that really fills you with a great sense of
it's very satisfying. Yeah.
Very. On the other hand, people from the public sector could go to the private sector and understand how to operate better. And moving between both parties really benefits both worlds. And I think today there is a high wall between the two sectors. And I think there is contempt even between those two worlds. And people don't move between the two, don't speak the two languages. And I think both worlds are really, it's really damaging for both sides. I think we saw in the past year and a half, people from the private sector taking responsibility on what's happening in Israel, which was moving. I'm saying, do the next step, guys. Jump in. Don't go to politics. Go be a civil servant for 5 years, for 7 years. Make your impact, go back. It's fine. The other way around, people from the public sector should do the same. I think we can really, there is a good momentum now to go do this move, and then you will get those data-driven people who understand your language, working for you, and as a citizen and as a CEO, you will get people who understand how interests work, how to work in chaotic landscapes so much better.
Yeah, I totally, I think that, I wanted to stay away from October 7th and all the stuff that happens, but I think that to that point, what you saw super unique in Israel is the arvut adadit, right? It's the kind of mutual solidarity. Yeah. People jumped in, rolled their sleeves in all sectors. Like, I know from a personal experience, the tech industry, but all sectors jumped in. And I think one of the things that happened is that people started to appreciate the value of being part of communities and part of society. And it's a bigger topic and maybe a little bit more philosophic, but it definitely feels much better to give without an expectation of getting back. So
I think it's super actionable.
It is.
You can apply.
Yeah.
to
join the revolution.
Yes, you can apply to I'm half kidding. I think that the public sector is hungry for these kind of people to really commit, not as a solidarity act around very sad times in our joint lives, but in really commit to doing good for the public in Israel. And I think they can bring so much value.
So with that optimistic message, thank you, Keren, for taking time, sharing your thoughts. Much appreciated. It was a pleasure.
For me as well.
Awesome. Thank you so much.